You guys look so badass in your suits. Do they chafe? And how do you pee?
Hey everyone, thanks for joining me. I'm Evelyn with you here on Reppin. My guest today is an incredibly talented actor, producer, and director. He's got an expansive list of credits in film, theater, and television. He's known for his starring role on Showtime's hit series, Homeland. He played David Estes, the director of the CIA's Counterterrorism Center, alongside Claire Danes and Damian Lewis. He's co-starred with Leonardo DiCaprio and Jennifer Connelly in Blood Diamond. You've also seen him in The Man in the High Castle, The Night Manager, and most recently as Hank Henshaw, John Jones in Supergirl, where he also made his directorial debut. He's also had an illustrious theater career and even made history in 1997 playing the National Theatre's first ever Black Othello. But his personal journey has been a very difficult one. When he was in his 20s, he suffered a psychotic break. In 2017, on World Mental Health Awareness Day, he wanted to support those struggling with mental health, and he took to Twitter and spoke publicly about his experiences for the first time. The response was so overwhelming that he wanted to tell his story and piece together what happened to him so he could help other people understand what it's like to experience psychosis. He was soon commissioned by the BBC to produce a powerful documentary about his journey, titled Psychosis and Me. In the film, he retraced his steps to key locations from his breakdown and meets the people who witnessed his decline. He sees his medical records for the first time and learns what actually happened was dramatically different from what he thought happened. He's here to talk about all of this and more. Please meet the amazing David Harewood. First of all, thank you so much for being here. How are you doing? You look fantastic. You're in Vancouver, correct?
I'm in Vancouver, yes. I'm actually I'm just putting the finishing touches to my first book. I've just finished them, 80,000 words. I'm feeling very happy and very chuffed that I've got to the end, and I'm just sort of, I've been writing about this book for about 6 months now. It's been quite difficult, but I feel great that I've got to the end of it.
What is this book about? And thank you for the scoop.
It's based on my documentary. I don't know if you've seen my documentary.
Of course I did.
I was inspired by that event, basically, to kind of go back and really kind of find out what happened to me. So I've sort of gone back over my life from my very first memory, which is like when I was 5 years old, walking out the back door of my kitchen. And we lived in quite a racist neighborhood. And somebody threw a stone at me and cracked me straight in the head.
Oh, my God.
And that was one of my first memories of the outside world, just kind of wandering outside and moving my head around and getting this stone hit me in the face. I've kind of written this whole kind of book. It's really interesting because it kind of, as you say, it mirrors very much what's happening today. It's interesting how growing up in quite a racist environment, or a time when a certain group were sort of enforcing their supremacy, it was kind of scary time. So I'm kind of seeing how that shaped my life.
Yeah.
How that shaped my experience growing up.
Right.
And almost realizing that in a sense I sort of became the clown, became an actor, almost to get away from that. And sort of found that in acting, my skin color was never a question. So I could be a king, I could be Hamlet, I could be Romeo, I could do whatever. And that was a wonderful place to be, to learn acting. But when I came out of acting, came out of drama school, hit the real world, that's when the realities of race and racism really kind of revisited me. And I suddenly, that was a very difficult sort of, a very difficult thing for me to a time for me to navigate, as I suddenly realized that it was all very real. Racism was very real, and that what that sort of meant for my sort of dreams and aspirations, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, David, you just opened up a whole lot of stuff that I wanted to get into. So I want to sort of back up just a little bit. You grew up obviously not from the Bronx. You're from Birmingham in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
I am quite taken aback that your first memory is of being cracked in the head because of race. That being one of your first memories, how do you think that impacted you I mean, I can't even imagine like that's being your first memories, being cracked in the head, and you were met with such racism. I mean, I know that you said in previous interviews you had a happy childhood, you had a good family.
Yes, completely. I would just jump in there. I mean,
Yeah.
we internalize so much of that. We do. We've for years, and we internalize that pain. And I remember trying to talk to my dad about his experience of coming to England, and he would never talk about it. It's difficult stuff to talk about, and I think for many years we all just internalized it. You just suck it up and get on with it. I think that's kind of deep trauma that sits there. I found that when you are visible, like, just after George Floyd's death, when suddenly Black Lives Mattered, white friends were calling you up, okay? It was painful because we were suddenly visible. And talking about that sort of pain, I found anyway, kind of exhausting. And after a while, I didn't really want to talk about it.
So you faced racism at a very early age, being cracked in the head. And then also you were the only Black family on your street. Jumping forward, you got into acting at the encouragement of your teachers.
Yeah.
And you said you could play anything. You could be anybody. Race wasn't an issue. Talk a little bit about one of your defining moments when you became an actor and you were able to be anyone, that skin color wasn't a problem. Because I think later on, you were the first Black actor to play Othello in London's National Theatre in 97-98. You were faced with incredible racism because you were, quote unquote, an other. You were not Black enough for the Black audiences, and you were rejected by the white audiences. And I will quote you, and you said you were called a coconut. And the reason why I bring that up is because I've been called a banana.
I kind of think I know what that is. Is it if it's the same as the coconut?
Yeah, it's exactly the same as a coconut, except it's used for Asians. A totally derogatory comment. Acting, you said you found your place in the world.
Yeah.
I mean, you didn't just go to any acting school. You went to the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts. So can we say overachiever?
It was another twist of fate because I didn't know anything about drama schools. So I auditioned for about 3 places before I ended up at RADA, and was rejected from all 3 of those places. And then I went to the 4th one. It's not the best school. And I was accepted. I cancelled my remaining auditions, which just happened to be the top 5 drama schools in the country, RADA being one of them. RADA, Central, Guildhall, Webber Douglas, and Lambda or something like that. So they were the top 5. I cancelled them all. And then a couple of weeks after I'd got into this college, I got a phone call from RADA saying, "Why didn't you turn up for your audition yesterday?" And I just very quickly surmised that they hadn't got the letter. So I just lied. And I just said, my mum was ill, so I had to look after her. And he said, "Well, it's your lucky day because someone's dropped out tomorrow. Would you like to have their slot?" So I just said, "Yeah, sure." And I just went down without a care in the world and just had a great day. And I got in.
Thank God. Now let's go back to playing Othello. What was it like when you stepped into the role of Othello in London's National Theatre? You were the first, but it was actually marked, from what my understanding, the point where you really began to struggle with identity. Because unfortunately, you were not accepted by either audiences, Black or white. Was that your first moment where you consciously recognized a struggle with identity and being an other?
No, I think slightly got your timelines mixed up.
Oh, okay.
Because that happened prior to my breakdown. So actually, I'm just thinking about it now. I entered the 90s just having recovered from my breakdown, which was as a result of my struggle with identity. That was with Romeo.
Got it. Okay.
I played Romeo. And that was my first job out of drama school. So I left drama school and almost immediately walked into, a sort of blaze of publicity being the first Black Romeo. I think that's what you were referring to. That was met with quite a lot of hostility and sneering comments and sneering reviews and, dripping in colonial attitudes. And that certainly undermined my sense of identity. And as I say, in the end, I had to stop reading them because they were becoming hurtful. And were undermining me. I would say sort of really undermining my sanity when they're attacking me so personally.
I can't even imagine. So when you were getting such incredible scrutiny and you were having this, horrible situation where you were getting attacked by both sides, and then you were struggling with identity, that's what led you to the psychotic breakdown, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, I want to jump into that because I did watch your documentary,
Mm-hmm.
which is called Psychosis and Me.
Mm-hmm.
And let me just first tell you, it's really a great film. So I've worked on a lot of documentaries. I know when I'm working on a project, every frame of that footage is scrutinized.
Mm.
I give you every accolade because here you are producing this powerful, honest film. But this is your personal story. This is about your psychotic break. I don't even know how you would approach this. How do you balance between being, the producer and filmmaker? Because you'd have to look at it with an objective eye to be able to really sort of step back, be dispassionate with your approach in how you structure the story and how you tell the story.
Mm-hmm.
But also you're the person that lived through this struggle. But first I want to slow down and, give some background. Tell the audiences or listeners, like, what happened. I mean, you talked about being the Black Romeo. It should have been a celebrated moment. It turned into something that thrusted you into a real struggle of identity and a psychotic breakdown. Talk a little bit about that sort of time period and what you were going through, and then we'll get into the film, because I think that documentary is something that I think everyone should watch.
Well, as I say, I came out of drama school and I suddenly found myself in a very unfamiliar world. As you say, being scrutinized, feeling adrift from who I was. I hadn't really decided who I was. And I guess I started to, at its worst point, started to drink rather heavily and to kind of cover how unhappy I was. As I said, I go into it in my book, but I had a very personal sort of Me Too moment, which was with somebody which was also very destabilizing around that age. So I was very unhappy and in a bad place, and I sort of came back to London really in a bad way, and I guess I just sort of wanted to cover for that unhappiness, and by sort of inventing somebody else to be. I think the thing with psychosis is that you do have irregular thoughts, you disturbed thoughts, hallucinations, delusions, and unbeknownst to me, they were already starting, but I wasn't aware of them. So I was getting these rushes of energy, and you get these rushes of dopamine in your brain, which kind of gives you almost a natural high. So I wasn't sleeping. I was getting up at 3 a.m. and going for walks across London. And as I say in the documentary, it was a tremendously sort of psychologically vivid, exciting, unusual time. But eventually I just lost control of that, and physically just became exhausted because I wasn't really sleeping. And eventually it ended up being quite a traumatic and dramatic breakdown.
I cannot even imagine what that experience was like, because I think from watching your film, I learned that because of this rush of dopamine, you're almost like enjoying it, right? It's like almost having a good time.
There were several times when it was wonderful. And, I have looked into this, and there are other communities around the world where it's treated very differently. And it's almost a shamanic, people will come around and ask that person questions because they speak truths and they speak their minds and they speak out. So it's almost something close to a shamanic experience where you become a seer. And there was certainly, for me, seemed to be a spiritual element to it. It was very, very powerful. It was extremely florid. I guess my head was so full of literature and imagery from acting that it just kind of took on a whole new cosmic importance.
That time was obviously a very difficult time for you. What made you decide to open yourself up and to do this documentary? Because going back to what I was saying before, as a storyteller, you are scrutinizing the story. But here you're scrutinizing your personal story in this fiercely personally challenging time. What made you decide to do it? And what was that like for you?
I made huge mistake. I did. I made a huge mistake. It
Why is that?
taught me a huge lesson
Which was?
because I thought I knew what had happened. I thought I remembered it all. So when I originally sent out a tweet on World Mental Health Day that I had a breakdown, just saying to everybody, she's all the best, and a little message of support. But it just exploded from there. Within a couple of days, I was writing an article for a newspaper, Guardian newspaper. A friend of mine who was around me at the time read the article and was heard to remark, "That's not how I remember it." When I heard him that he'd said that, I thought to myself, I thought I knew what had happened. I thought that it was all quite fun and it was, we had a bit of a laugh and I just dipped out for a week or so, but it was all kind of weird. And so I thought maybe I'd forgotten about it. That's when I then pitched the idea to a producer friend of mine that I'd go back and find out, not knowing the truth. So the day when I get to the hospital with my two friends,
Right.
that was literally the first time in 30 years I'd heard all of that. I remember as soon as we were getting closer to that building, it just all started getting very real on the day. I got quite scared actually, because I then suddenly realized, what else am I going to find?
Yeah.
I was really quite scared because it was quite a shock to me to realize that I'd been sectioned quite so dramatically. And
Right.
my friend Nick was in tears. I saw him break down when he was telling me, and I thought, this had collateral damage on him. This is the first time we'd spoken about it in 30 years. And then when I saw his emotion, it kind of triggered me. And I broke down a little bit. And then I walked outside and I just remembered all of it. And I remembered how ill I was. Now, I was really very scared because I suddenly thought, I want to stop filming right now and revisit this idea. But Wendy was great. The director, Wendy, was great. She kind of brought me through it. I remained terrified for the rest of filming.
Yeah.
To jump back before that, I had said to Wendy, because we'd spoken before we started filming, I'd said, look, I'm not going to ask any questions. I'm just going to experience it as it happens on the day. I don't need to know, where we're going with this. So it was happening in the moment. And once that happened, I was very, very scared because then I suddenly realized I also had to present this program and experience it at the same time.
Yeah.
So I was sort of processing it and presenting. And that was extremely difficult. Once or twice I had to cancel filming because I had to say, look, I need a break because it was too much.
Okay, I have to say this, and I'm going to say this very bluntly. It took some serious balls for you to do what you did, because I think the whole experience would have been frightening to do privately. But you did it, and you could see that this was the first time you were looking at your own medical records and seeing what the doctors wrote at that time. You were re-experiencing this trauma, and it was done so honestly.
I'm very proud of it, and I'm proud of it because it is so raw and so honest, and it's allowed me to be. I've only ever had an experience like that through acting, maybe once or twice in my career, where I've sort of been so in the moment. I like a challenge. If someone said to me, "You got 3 days before you're on stage and playing King Lear," I'd think that was a real challenge. If someone said, "Look, we need you to get ready. We need you to get ready right now and go on as King Lear," I'd kind of go, "Great!" It would thrill me.
Right.
That's the same kind of. The first time I watched it back, my producer and my director, they wanted to make sure I had all support systems in place. I had phone numbers of people I could call. I found it beautifully done. I thought there was so many editing decisions that were just perfect. How it described my looking in the mirror and stuff. I was like, oh, that's just fantastic.
Yeah.
I only freaked out when it was on television. That was a whole other experience.
It just took a tremendous amount of courage. And I will challenge you respectfully when I say, I get the excitement and the thrill of having to prepare a project in 3 days, but this isn't a project.
Yeah.
This is really going deep and in the most public and honest way.
I didn't expect it to. And as I say, it caught me by complete surprise. And that's what made it such a journey, because you could see the moment. You could literally see the moment happen. And from then on, it was a journey of discovery for me as well as the audience. And I sat in on that group of kids. They weren't originally supposed to be in the film that much, but that day was wonderful. when they all opened up and started talking to me, sitting in on that class, that was the most amount of information I'd heard on psychosis in 30 years. So I was like sitting there going, wow. And that's when I put my hand up and I answered the question. And one of the girls turned to me, she went, how would you know? And I said, well, I had psychosis. And that's when everyone started talking to me. And it was great. It became organic. They actually helped me.
That's amazing. But I can't imagine the complex emotions you must have been feeling during filming, watching it, and putting it out there. Now that you've had a little bit of time from it, what was the one goal that you wanted to accomplish when you said yes to the project? And do you feel like you accomplished that goal?
Yeah, I do, because which was exactly the reason why I sent that tweet out, which was just to try and sort of reduce the stigma or help people, just let people know that happened to me. If you're struggling, it's happened to me. I've got through it, and it wasn't the end of me. I'm not embarrassed about it. I'm not shying away from it. It happened. I'm happy to talk about it, and just to kind of almost inspire people and let people know that you can recover from it. The area of mental health that's sort of shrouded in shame. People talk about anxiety or depression or bipolar. They're all kind of a bit cool, but no one talks about psychosis because it's the one where they take you away. It's like it's where you lose your mind and go crazy, and it's never spoken about. So me doing it seems to have given people a language. What's been extraordinary is that I constantly get stopped by people in the street who say, just want to say thank you so much. It happened to my dad, and we never talked about it because we didn't know what to say. We were always a bit embarrassed about it, so we've never spoken about it. We saw your film, and now we speak about it. And we go, yeah, it's psychosis. It's just because they just didn't understand it. People don't understand what happened, so it's given people just a bit of a language to talk about, and it's also given people sort of permission to come forward and deal with it. Literally, the night after the documentary went out, calls about psychosis rose by 107%.
Wow.
So people are talking about it now. People are, oh, that's what's happening to me. I think I'm spinning out. It's psychosis. And particularly the number of actors that I've been asked to speak to, asked to support, because it tends to happen to a lot of young actors. And I wasn't aware of that, but it's quite prevalent in young kids studying at drama school, going through major changes in their life, living away from home, adolescence to adulthood, playing with different identities and emotions. It's a time that can be very fertile for psychosis and for major psychological change.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like there's a lot there that could, trigger a break. I also really want to point out, it's one thing to speak publicly in private circles. It's another thing to speak publicly in public circles. But you really turned it all the way up, David. I mean, you didn't just speak publicly, like you literally walked into and revisited this traumatic time.
I was really overwhelmed by it.
How could you not be?
We sat on the film for almost a year because the BBC wanted to put it out the following year. So I watched it quite a lot and I was quite happy with it. But when it came on the television, I was terrified. And I didn't watch it. Nobody watched it in the house. I went to bed thinking I'd ruined my career and wondering what I'd done and had I brought, is it going to affect the kids? Is it going to affect the name? Is it going to affect? Well, and I had a bit of a panic. And then as I was lying in bed, just everything started buzzing, beeping, and everything was bleeping, emails, ding, ding, bong, ding, 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 ding. Then the phone started ringing. I ran downstairs. It's my mum on the phone. And my mum was just gushing. She said it was great. And that made me feel better and calm me down. She said she was really happy. She said, really, really good. Told the story well. And I just read some of these messages and emails, and they were all overwhelming. Just incredible people, really incredible people, saying how much it affected them. And one letter from somebody, quite high up in the organisation, just saying that he actually had to apologise to me because he'd actually shown it to his family a month ago. He said, privately, because it happened to their father. They'd never spoken about it. And so he had to show it to his brother. And then his brother said, we have to show this to, the other brother. So, and we all sat down and watched it. And it was the first time we'd spoken about it in, a lifetime. It's given people permission to talk about it.
Your sharing your story has probably helped so many people. in a lot of different ways. One being, recognizing, a similar struggle they might be having. Depression, anxiety, PTSD, all of these things are very serious mental conditions and need support. But at least it's kind of out there. You're right. Psychosis and a psychotic break is so shoved in the back of the closet. There's really no understanding or awareness. And there's still a strong stigma attached. I really tip my hat to you, the amount of courage that it took to do what you did, not just share your story, but also in the way that you did it. When you sort of went through that process of making this film, and the first time you saw it, what was the perspective that it gave you that you might not have had before the documentary? Because you said, the way you remember it was obviously very different from what actually happened.
Mhm.
And here you are, you're not only re-experiencing it, you are reading what the doctors were, noting what your mental state was. And, your friends who were with you at the time, you were getting their accounts of what they were seeing you go through, but also their accounts of what they experienced being around you. So you have all of that happening, and that's a lot. But David, you're also a producer and a director, so you have to approach it from those perspectives too. So you're seeing your personal situation from all of these different vantage points. What did you get that you might not have had before that you learned about yourself that actually has now helped you?
Well, here's the funny thing, because it's been quite a process. Just after it went out, I was just so overwhelmed by the response, literally just sobbing in the street with complete strangers who would tell me their stories of brothers or dads, mums who it happened to. I just found it really overwhelming and painfully overwhelming. People would sort of break through the celebrity of my persona, and they were coming straight to me, and it was piercing. I felt very raw and very exposed. So I ran off back to Vancouver to film Supergirl and kind of licked my wounds while I was here. And then just trying to process everything. But then somebody asked me to write the book, and I thought about it. And then I started jotting a few things down, and then lockdown happened. And I was just sitting at home one morning, and I just got up and started writing. But I wrote 2 chapters, but I didn't. And you think about my medical records. The scene was supposed to be I sit there and read my medical records, but as soon as I read what was in it, I said, I'm not reading this, and we stopped filming. And whenever she asked me to look at the records again, I never looked at it. I just went into soft focus and just pretended to read, because this stuff is like dynamite. I put it in the envelope, and I didn't look at it for 2 years. I put it on the shelf at the back there. But when I came back after lockdown, having started my book, I was like, I have to look at that. So I've been sitting with it for the last 6 months, sitting with all of my broken, demented thoughts, beliefs, and what I was saying, what I was doing. Some of it's really painful. It's reading your broken mind. And so it's been kind of interesting to kind of sit with and decipher, but almost like a dream. I've been able to sort of put it together, and it's made me just understand what my fault lines are and understand where my vulnerabilities are. I think now I'm able to process all of that, and I can kind of sit here and say, I've looked at my most vulnerable, deepest thing, my weakest moment, and I've sort of embraced it. I've been there, touched it. I've sort of been with it, sat with it. And it kind of doesn't frighten me anymore. Nothing really frightens me anymore, because I've been to that place twice. I'm okay with it. I'm okay with my faults and weaknesses. I continue to work on them. They won't ever spin me out anymore. I know what my fears are.
You referenced it as dynamite, which I couldn't agree with you more. Your ability to be willing to touch that dynamite and to look at it in the face is tremendous. A lot of people would be very scared to touch it, and that would be a very understandable position to have. But here you are, you're faced with a piece of your past, and the realities of it is staring at you in the face.
Mm-hmm.
What gave you the strength to face it. So now you can be aware of your faults. It's given you a much fuller perspective. You see the good, you see the bad, and you see the ugly. And it doesn't frighten you anymore. So how are you willing to not only look at it, but you were able to transform it and you were able to incorporate it into who you are and to be comfortable with it?
I couldn't write this book without it. I had to really go there. I never would have thought I was going to write an 80,000 word book. I found it remarkably easy because it just flew out of me. So it's a kind of a breakdown, it's a memoir of a breakdown recovery. And funny enough, I found all the stuff up to the breakdown really interesting fascinating to write because it was like a trip through my past. Like I had to really start to understand my life, as I say, right from my very first memories, just to tell the whole story of where I am today and who I am today. So I knew I couldn't be honest if I didn't look at it. And I feel as though it's made me just far more, it's freed me. I'm far more honest with myself. I'm not afraid to face some of the racism I wake up to sometimes, some days in my Twitter feed.
Yeah.
Some of that can be destabilizing, but now I know that I've done my work on race.
Mm-hmm.
I've literally said me crazy, but I feel as though it's other people going crazy right now as they try and wrestle with a new narrative. It can't take this other narrative. I feel quite confident and proud of my ancestry. I feel quite happy that I have the ability to offer up a counter narrative to some of the stories that are out there.
I just think it's fascinating because when I was watching the film Psychosis and Me, which again, I recommend to everyone to watch, it's just an important story. It sheds light on a topic that urgently needs attention, and it's so well done. If I was in your position, I would think that I would be walking into one of the most destabilizing experiences of my life. And I would be so fearful of it not only re-traumatizing me, but not being able to recover from it. And it's so remarkable that not only did you walk into a situation, granted, you might not have, thought it through all the way, but it feels like what was a very difficult experience has become something that you own now versus it owning you, and it grounds you in some way. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely no doubt that I thought I was in a better place with this whole thing than I thought I was when I embarked on this project, and it was a lot more difficult than I thought. But in having said that, it has been the making of it, because I feel as though, as you say, by touching that hot stone, I think I've been able to kind of reach back and understand. By reaching back and kind of seeing those kind of darker moments, I've been able to sort of fill in the gaps, understand where I am. And yes, as you say, it's destabilizing, but life is destabilizing, and my life has been destabilizing. And in a sense, it's kind of it's something that's mirrored throughout my life, because I've constantly been moving, playing in America. I'm working in Houston, working in New York, working in London, moving, shifting, changing. It's been a part of who I am. I think embracing that with all its faults has been as much a part of this journey as anything else.
I think it's incredible. Now, because of your experiences, I'm going to make the assumption that that's also why you are such an advocate for mental health.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what's also really incredible is just your overall sense of humanity. You are involved with so many different charities, David. You are a mental health advocate. You're involved with engaging the Black community to encourage stem cell donation, getting people out to vote, creating more realistic roles for Black actors and ethnic actors. You are the UNICEF UK ambassador. And it doesn't even end there. I mean, talk about giving back. Here's a story. You donated bone marrow to save someone's life. I guess what I'm trying to kind of get to overall is, where does this sense of humanity come from? And a lot of people want to do good things. They have empathy.
Mm-hmm.
It's another thing to get off the sidelines and to actually commit to doing something. Where does this sense of humanity and you really committing to doing something about giving back, where does that come from?
I think I've always been sort of a team player, as it were. Played a lot of sports and stuff as a kid, and also I lay that with my natural joy that I have as an entertainer. I always want everyone to be happy. I always want everyone to be in a good place. I'd rather everybody work in a good environment, than a shitty environment.
Yes.
I generally want people to have a good time. So I love directing because I generally want to have a laugh. I was in London many years ago, and I came across the story of a young boy, 12-year-old black boy who had leukemia. He was waiting for a sort of bone marrow transplant. Being black, I think it's something like if you're white, you have a 1 in 10 chance of finding a blood match. I think if you're black, it's a 1 in 1,000 chance, because there's been so much blood mixing on our travails across the world through Africa that it's very difficult to find a match for black patients, black leukemia patients. The numbers are really not in your favor. So we went on this drive to encourage black people to get on the register. And the following year, it was at Notting Hill Carnival, I saw the lady whose son had leukemia, who passed away a couple of years ago. I saw her doing one of these drives, and she'd started something called the Afro-Caribbean Leukemia Trust, which was a charity specifically to raise awareness within the black community and to try and get more black people onto the blood donor register. I saw her, so I kind of went in, and she herself put the needle in my arm and took a sample of my blood. And it went off into the National Blood Register. I was there ready, basically, to go. And then about 2 years later, I'm doing this job in Vilnius, in Lithuania, and I get this call saying, you're a match for somebody. We can't tell you who it is, but it's a young person, and you're a very, very close match. Would you be willing to donate? I was absolutely. It was like, it felt like I'd won the lottery. It felt quite emotional. I thought, yes, I've got a chance to save someone. So they took me through the process, and it meant 7 days. For 7 days, I had a nurse come around and inject me with some serum. But your body produces stem cells anyway. This, whatever it was boosting my stem cell production in my body. Come the seventh day, I would go in and get the needle in my arm. Blood would come out of my arm, and it's quite emotional because at the same time that person is at their most weakest, because they're having all the blood drained out of them, ready for this new set of blood. Just take as much as you can, and it after about an hour the machine stopped working, and I was like, cut me, and then it went off to this person, and they had another 3 years.
Wow.
I felt that I kind of failed, but the doctor said, no, that's 3 more years than they would have had, if you hadn't have done that. So it was emotional.
That's an incredible story. And you saved his life. You gave him more time.
Yeah. No, it's kind of, but I would think, I don't think we've actually seen the best of the humanity through this coronavirus. It's been quite depressing and sad to see how we've been so divisive with it, and not prepared to think for each other and protecting each other. And it's been depressing that we haven't had that. You kind of wish that people would have that thought for others, because as you were saying at the beginning of the program, you've got to, at some point, you've got to do something. You've got to, actually stand up and try and make something count. So I guess that was my way of just actually saying, I want to be in the game.
Your sense of humanity and getting off the benches to help people. You make the time, and you're involved with so many different charities and contribute in numerous ways. What would your advice be to somebody who would say to you, David, I don't have your resources. I don't have your, income, or I don't have your platform, or whatever it is. What would your advice be?
I think everyone's got to find that small thing that they can do, whether it's random acts of kindness or finding a way to affect your day. It could be talking to a stranger, or being there for a friend. I just think it's just being open to other people. Staying curious about the world and not accepting. It's so worrying right now.
It's been a jagged road that you've been on. You went through the documentary, the fragility of feeling so exposed, but finding it now a place that grounds you and you are able to look at. Now you're writing a book.
Just finished, by the way.
When is that coming out?
Oh, it will be this August.
This August?
Yeah, August, September.
All right, I'm going to put that on my calendar so I can go get my copy. But with the jagged road you've been on, being clocked in the head,
Mhm.
with struggling with identity, with the psychotic break, when you look at that for a second and you take it all in,
Mhm.
what do you celebrate?
Oh my God, I celebrate that I got through it. And I really do. It's extraordinary. I know one of the things I found out in this, by looking at my medical records and giving them to the psychologist who appears in the documentary, actually, Dr. Erin Turner, who stayed quite good friends. So I sent her a copy of my records to peruse. She said, "You were given 3 times the legal dose of tranquilizers, 3 times a day. 3 times the legal dosages." I don't know how my mind got through that. I mean, I was literally plied with some very strong antipsychotics for 5 days. I only have brief memories and flashes of things that happened. There's things that I would remember and think, where is that memory? I can't place that memory. It's only from reading my medical records that I go, oh, that's what that was. It's just a flash of a memory that I can see me doing something, and I never knew what it was. But now I've read my medical records. It says that's what I did, and I'm like, fuck, that's oh my God. So there's all these chunks falling into place of my life that I've been unable to place, unable to locate, and I'm able to, as you say, put the pieces of this jigsaw together now, and sort of go, oh, I see. This is the picture. I'm just glad I can keep finding pieces because it just adds more color, adds more flavor to who I am.
Do you feel like you are a better person for going through it and surviving it?
Oh God. Oh my God. Yes, without a doubt. You can't go through something like, well, you can, but I can't.
No, you can. You can, and people do.
I've been very lucky. I work in a profession because lots of people write and tell me, they tell their bosses that they had mental health problems and they've been fired on the spot. People still aren't totally okay with it. But luckily I work in a profession where as long as you turn up reasonably sober and remembering your lines, you can kind of get away with it. I sort of got away with it for the last 30 years, and it seems to be working. I'm lucky enough.
What's the number one lesson that you've learned that you like to pay forward?
First of all, I would say acknowledge that you're struggling, and then take some help and try and get yourself through it, because burying it and sort of ignoring it, I think it just builds up to the point where it just explodes, as it did with me. But I think had I have had the right information early on and known what was happening, I might have been able to arrest my slide and correct course. And seek some help, get some early intervention, particularly if you're struggling. I think struggling mentally, you can very easily lose control. So I would always encourage people to seek some kind of help if they can.
I really think it's incredible that you put yourself out there in the way that you did. You really, went out on a limb to help others.
It hasn't always been easy. As I say, it was, doing the publicity for it was really tough because I would be talking about myself, my deep, darkest stuff. Be on a radio show, it's, some radio Cheshire, and now over to the weather. And after the weather, we've got David Harewood talking about his mental illness. And David, tell us what happened. And you've got to kind of wrap it up in these kind of snappy sound bites over a cheery breakfast show about your deepest, darkest pain. And after about 20 minutes, I just wanted to slit my wrists. I just wanted to get out of there. It's just like, I can't do this. This is tough stuff.
It's such a weird and messed up position to be in. Here you are, you're trying to talk about something so hard, and you're creviced between like a cooking segment and the weather. But that's the job.
It was in between the news and the weather. That's the job, as you say. But it was tougher than I thought. I recognise how, because I've been doing Supergirl for the last 6 years, and I only have 2 months of the year back in England, and I always tend to fill that time up with interviews and requests, and before I know it, I'm exhausted, and I've had to learn not to do that anymore, to rest, because like I was when I was exposed, it was just too much, and I found just emotionally just too much. So and you have to be careful as well.
David, will you come back in the future?
Yes, of course. I love it here.
So we have a signature sign off here, David. Can you let me know who you are and what you represent?
My name is David Harewood, and I represent truth, honesty, and the ability to be yourself with no shame or judgment attached.
With great thanks to David Harewood for coming to Reppin, for sharing his story and courage, and for all the work he's doing not only on screen, but for the incredible advocate he's being, giving back in so many powerful and wonderful ways. Want to keep up with David? Yeah, I thought you would. So I'll have his social media handles in the episode description. Next up, from Hamilton, Jesus Christ Superstar, Rent Live, Power, we have the Tony, Emmy, and Grammy Award nominee, Brandon Victor Dixon.
Every action I take is putting something into the world. It's putting something into the equation of exchange. So I need to think about what I'm introducing into the equation of exchange. Hey guys, Brandon Victor Dixon here, and guess what? I'm coming to Reppin.
Reppin is available on all top podcast platforms, and you know what? Every episode is available for download, so get them on your devices. And subscribe, tell your friends, and leave a review. Talk to me. I want to know what you think. You can reach me on Twitter at Reppin Podcast, and follow me on Instagram at Reppin_podcast. Thanks always to Nelson Pinero for all of his time, talent, and care. And always love and thanks to Gracie Kong. Reppin is a Suburban Outlaw Productions. Until next time, stand up and represent.